Have you ever wondered why the most brilliant people you know seem to drift away from parties, avoid small talk, and choose books over crowded gatherings? Why does your smartest friend prefer solitude while everyone else craves constant social validation? You might think they're antisocial, weird, or even arrogant. But what if I told you there's something much deeper happening here? What if the very intelligence that makes them brilliant also makes them see through the illusions that keep most people trapped in endless social games? Arthur Schopenhauer, the 19th century German philosopher, who was as brilliant as he was solitary, understood this paradox better than anyone. He lived it, breathed it, and gave us the philosophical framework to understand why intelligence often leads to social withdrawal. And here's the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to admit. Smart people don't avoid social life because they're broken. They avoid it because they see it for what it really is. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. But before you think this is about becoming a hermit or cutting yourself off from the world, let me be clear. This is about understanding why your mind works the way it does, why you feel exhausted after social gatherings while others seem energized, why you crave depth while others seem satisfied with surface-level connections, and most importantly, how to use this understanding to build a life that actually nourishes your soul instead of draining it. So ask yourself this: how long will you keep forcing yourself into social situations that leave you feeling empty, misunderstood, and mentally exhausted? How long will you pretend that your need for solitude is something to be ashamed of? Because what Schopenhauer discovered about the relationship between intelligence and social life will change everything you thought you knew about yourself. And it starts with understanding the fundamental conflict that exists within every thinking person. Schopenhauer saw something that most people miss entirely. He understood that human existence is driven by two opposing forces, the will and the intellect. And this distinction explains everything about why intelligent people struggle with social life. The will is our blind driving force. It's what makes people desperate for attention, validation, status, and belonging. It's the part of you that wants to be liked, accepted, included. The will pushes you toward others because it believes that connection will somehow fill the emptiness inside. It's primitive, instinctual, and completely unconscious. But the intellect, that's different. The intellect sees clearly. It observes without being driven by need. And when you have a powerful intellect, something fascinating happens. You begin to see through the social games that captivate everyone else. And you start to notice how most conversations are just people performing for each other. How social gatherings are often elaborate displays of insecurity masked as confidence. How the loudest person in the room is usually the most desperate for validation. And once you see these patterns, you can't participate in them the same way. This is why intelligent people often feel like aliens in social situations. They're watching a play where everyone else is completely absorbed in their roles, while they can see the stage, the props, the desperate need for applause. And it's exhausting to pretend you don't see what you clearly see. Most people live entirely through their will. They chase social connections like addicts chasing their next fix. But intelligent people can step outside this compulsion through what Schopenhauer called pure contemplation. They can observe life instead of being consumed by it. And here's where it gets interesting. The more you can access this intellectual clarity, the less you need external validation, the less you need the crowd's approval, the less you need to fill your calendar with meaningless social obligations just to feel worthy. But this comes with a price. Because when you stop feeding people's expectations, when you stop playing the social games they're addicted to, they notice, and they don't like it. This brings us to one of Schopenhauer's most profound insights: the hedgehog dilemma. Imagine hedgehogs trying to stay warm in winter. They need to get close to each other for warmth, but when they do, their quills hurt each other. So they move apart, get cold, and try to get close again. An endless cycle of approach and withdrawal, need and pain. This is exactly what happens in human relationships. We desperately need connection, but the closer we get, the more we wound each other. We hurt and get hurt. We disappoint and get disappointed. We try to control and get controlled. Most people live in this endless hedgehog dance, constantly seeking the perfect distance that will give them warmth without pain. But it doesn't exist. And intelligent people, being more sensitive to life's contradictions, feel this dilemma more acutely than others. They see how relationships often become transactions, how people use each other for emotional regulation, how love gets confused with need, and intimacy gets confused with codependence. And once you see these patterns clearly, casual socializing becomes almost unbearable. This is why your smartest friends often seem distant, why they're selective about who gets their time and energy. It's not because they don't care about people. It's because they care too much to waste their emotional energy on superficial connections that inevitably lead to mutual disappointment. In our age of social media and constant connectivity, this dilemma has become even more intense. We're all hedgehogs now, desperately poking each other through screens, seeking warmth, but mostly finding pain. And the intelligent ones are the first to put down their phones and walk away. But here's what most people don't understand about solitude. And this is where Schopenhauer's wisdom becomes life-changing. Solitude isn't about running away from people. It's about running toward yourself. In solitude, you're free from the exhausting need to perform, to explain yourself, to manage other people's emotions. You're free from the constant pressure to be someone else's idea of who you should be. And in that freedom, something beautiful happens. You start to discover who you actually are. Schopenhauer understood that genuine self-development can only happen in solitude. Because when you're constantly responding to external demands, when you're always in reactive mode, when you're always trying to fit into someone else's narrative, you lose touch with your authentic self. Social life often requires compromise, not just of your time and energy, but of your very identity. You learn to dim your light so others don't feel threatened. You learn to laugh at jokes that aren't funny. You learn to have opinions that don't rock the boat. And slowly, without realizing it, you become a stranger to yourself. But in solitude, the mask comes off, the performance ends, and you can finally hear your own voice without the world's constant interference. This is where real growth happens. This is where creativity blooms. This is where you develop the strength to live authentically instead of automatically. Intelligent people intuitively understand this. They know that their minds are their most valuable resource, and they protect them fiercely. They'd rather have one meaningful conversation than 10 shallow ones. They'd rather spend an evening with a book that expands their consciousness than at a party that shrinks it. And here's the paradox that drives other people crazy. The more comfortable you become with solitude, the less needy you become in social situations. And the less needy you are, the more attractive you become to people who are worth knowing. Now, before we go further, let's address the elephant in the room. This perspective has its shadows, and Schopenhauer himself embodied some of them. He could be elitist, misanthropic, and dismissive of people who didn't share his intellectual gifts. He sometimes confused his personal wounds with universal truths. And that's a trap we need to avoid, because social intelligence is also a form of intelligence. The ability to connect, to empathize, to build communities, to inspire and lead others. These are profound human capacities that deserve respect. The goal isn't to become a misanthropic hermit who looks down on everyone else. The goal is to understand your own nature so you can honor it without judging others for theirs. Some people are genuinely energized by social interaction. They think out loud, they process emotions through connection, they find meaning in community, and that's beautiful. The tragedy happens when we try to force square pegs into round holes. When introverted, intellectually driven people try to live like extroverted, socially driven people. Or when we shame people for needing solitude, for being selective, for preferring depth over breadth in their relationships. Balance is everything. Complete isolation can lead to stagnation, bitterness, and a dangerous disconnection from the human experience. Some of history's greatest thinkers were also deeply engaged with their communities. They found ways to contribute their gifts without sacrificing their need for intellectual solitude. But this balance has to come from understanding, not from guilt or social pressure. You need to know why you're the way you are before you can find healthy ways to engage with others. So what does this mean for your personal growth? How do you use Schopenhauer's insights to build a life that actually works for your mind and soul? First, stop apologizing for your nature. If you need more solitude than others, that's not a character flaw. It's how your mind optimally functions. If you prefer deep conversations to small talk, honor that preference instead of forcing yourself to pretend you enjoy surface-level chatter. Second, become selective about your social energy. Not everyone deserves access to your inner world. Not every invitation deserves a yes. Not every relationship deserves your precious time and attention. This isn't about being arrogant. It's about being responsible with your most valuable resources. Third, understand that your social needs might be different from others, and that's okay. You might need only a few close connections instead of a large social circle. You might prefer one-on-one conversations to group gatherings. You might recharge in solitude while others recharge through social interaction. None of this makes you wrong or broken. Fourth, use your intellectual clarity as a gift, not a weapon. Yes, you can see through social facades and manipulation tactics. Yes, you understand human psychology in ways that others don't. But this insight should lead to compassion, not cynicism. People are playing these games because they're suffering, not because they're evil. And finally, remember that authenticity is magnetic. When you stop trying to be who others want you to be and start being who you actually are, you attract people who appreciate your real self. The connections you make from this authentic place will be deeper, more meaningful, and more nourishing than anything you could build through social performance. The intelligent person's relationship with social life isn't about rejection or superiority. It's about conscious choice. It's about engaging with others from a place of strength rather than need. It's about contributing your unique gifts without losing yourself in the process. Schopenhauer showed us that the path to wisdom often leads through apparent isolation, but this isolation isn't an end in itself. It's a crucible where you forge the strength to engage with the world on your own terms, where you develop the clarity to see through illusions and the courage to live your truth. And paradoxically, when you become comfortable with being alone, you're never truly lonely, because you've found the most important relationship of all, the one with yourself. And from that foundation, every other connection becomes a choice rather than a desperate need. So the next time someone asks why you don't care about social life the way others do, you'll know the answer. It's not because you don't care about people. It's because you care enough about yourself to honor your authentic nature. And in a world full of people desperately trying to be someone else, that might be the most intelligent choice of all.